Howdy! It's just us and the leaf blower today. I think these are my favorite kind of videos. I also love doing, how-to raw food videos, but I think this kind of video where I just feel like I'm sitting down with a friend and having a chat about kind of what's new and what's coming up are my favorite kind of videos because I get to really share more part of myself and feel like I'm interacting with other people too, or who are kind of on the same page in the same world, and it's nice. Connection is nice. So I wanted to talk about something I've been writing about. It's a bit of an update too. I have a third book coming out really soon, within the next couple of months, which is a collection of essays. And then I have just gotten started on my next book, which is going to be all about what I'm talking about right now, just really fleshing it out. But what's become really apparent to me lately is what I'm going to call the theory of wholeness, TOW. Theory of wholeness. And that is the theory that we as human animals have probably mostly unconscious memories, but memories in general, about, if not before we came into human form and the experience of wholeness of that, if not that, then most certainly some kind of impressionistic memories of connectedness to our mothers in her body. And that imprint of wholeness actually is a blueprint for everything that is to follow. And sort of just the way it works is that after we are ejected from our mothers, we lose that complete sense of connection, of every need being met exactly when it's needed to be met. Hopefully, if we are in a healthy mom who is attuned to her own needs and attuned enough to her body that she's giving her body and thus us as the little person growing inside of her body what we need when we need it. And that's something that is so apparent to me too, how important it is as a mom and as a pregnant mom to be able to be in touch and in tune with your body so that you are giving your soon-to-be infant, your embryo, exactly what it needs, because your body will tell you what it needs. And that was so clear to me when I was pregnant, that here I was with this little person growing in my body, and I had nothing to do with that. There's no way I know how to create a human being. I didn't have any plan. I didn't have any blueprint of how this happens. I didn't do anything but listen to what was coming through me. I listened to what my body was telling me to do, to be the host for this little person and to allow her to come literally through me. Became so clear to me how we are not in charge. We like to think in our current modern culture that we're so in control, that we, have so much say over everything that happens to us. And it's this false sense of just having some kind of control, or largely having control over our lives. And it became so apparent to me during my pregnancy that is completely the inverse is reality. That life is living itself through our forms, and we can be there and enjoy that and observe that with whatever we are, right? The consciousness of all that happening. But really all we need to do is be here and listen to what's coming through and listen to the instructions of whatever the larger whole is that are coming through us, that we came through initially. And so this theory of wholeness that I've really been pondering is that once we are ejected from our mother's wombs and things are just sort of never the same again. By definition, they couldn't be, we're now outside the womb rather than inside, and our needs are not being fully, even with the most present mother, the baby is a separate being now. And there are going to be some times when the baby's hungry and it takes a while for the mom to figure out, oh, he's hungry or cold or whatever it is. You go through that process with a new baby of like, okay, they're crying. What is it? And sometimes it takes a little while. So even just those small, tiny little moments of the gap, between the need and then meeting of that need becomes larger and larger as we get older and we learn to meet our own needs as adults. And hopefully we learn into that and live into the process of listening to our bodies and knowing that those instructions and all those needs and the feelings are there to be felt and then responded to. If we have amazing parents who teach us, or let me take that back, who don't unteach us that that's the case, because that's what we come into the world knowing in our bodies, but we can easily be taken off track with that and unlearn of that, unlearn those things. Like in, let's see, is it Frozen 2? No, Frozen 1. One of the Frozens where Anna gets hit by Elsa's ice power and they take her to the trolls. I think it's Frozen 2. And the grandpappy troll says, good thing she was hit in the head, not the heart. The heart is hard to change, but the head can be convinced. And our heads become convinced, of other things, that instead of listening to our bodies, we should press on and be strong. And instead of expressing our emotions, we're just allowing our emotions internally and accepting them, that, we fight against them or we see ourselves in a certain way. And, it's easy to unlearn. It's easy to unlearn all those things that cause so much pain in our lives. But getting off track. Not that there's a track. But this feeling of wholeness, we often become more and more distance from. But there's always this memory of it, even, like I said, if it's just subconscious. And I feel, and I love all of the work around this. For me, I really feel like my whole adult life has been, maybe from about 25 years old on, has been really the realization and then the culmination of the understanding of this theory of wholeness, and that all of these things in my life, and I see it in other people as well, I see it in our culture, the disembodiment of our bodies. We tend to be, talking heads. We tend to, analyze but not feel, not recognize our feelings. We become disconnected from, you name it, really, so many areas of our lives, our food system, where clothing comes from, how we spend our time, the jobs that we do. It tends to become like when the the model for the assembly line came about, it sort of transmitted into, in a sense, how we live our lives as well. We've become specialists at little things and disconnected from the whole and disembodied. And disassociated in so many ways from a lot of those parts of our lives that are invisibly still there, and the disconnection becomes the pain. The disembodiment becomes the pain. It's a dismemberment. And my work, I feel very strongly coming through me, is remembering, the rememberment of all of those parts. Excuse me, the re-embodiment of all those forgotten, ignored, suppressed parts within us, and then also in our lives. So one of those parts for me that I really love talking about, but it really only is one part. It's just the part that kind of for me was a porthole into the bigger picture, and that is raw food, connecting to the food system, because I'm connecting with food in its whole form, and taking out all of the, or most of the processing of that food. And most people are so disconnected from their food sources. And certainly I still go to the grocery store and buy things, but for the most part, the wool has been taken from my eyes about our food system. And particularly, if you're a meat eater, most people are aware that there's a lot of that process that we simply don't want to be aware of, and that people selling things to us are very aware that we don't want to be aware of that, and really play a part in co-creating this narrative of where our food comes from, with happy little cartoon pictures and renaming things. For instance, we don't typically say, hey, do you want to eat some pig tonight? We'll say pork, because that removes it from part of that story we might not want to really have a lot of awareness around, because we'd have to face a lot of feelings in ourselves, literal feelings of maybe dismemberment, and that's painful. And if everyone had to do a tour of a animal processing plant, right, a slaughterhouse, I think there would be a lot less people maybe who would want to actually participate in that system and fund that system by buying that food. And I think that though it is painful, and food is a really good example of that system, because if we were to really educate ourselves on what happens to our food before it gets to us, our food, what happens to the things we eat, what happens to the animals that we eat before it gets to us in its nice, clean little package at the grocery store with a cutie picture of a cow on it or whatever. What happens to that animal to get that milk that we're drinking on a daily basis? The remembering of the wholeness of that often is painful, because we have to look at, first of all, the dismemberment, whether that's literal or figurative. It might be figurative in other areas. Food is such a good example for this, because it's literally dismemberment. We not only have to look at the dismemberment, but we have to look at what we've been ignoring in ourselves to be able to be a party to all of that. And we have to face that in ourselves, and we have to be willing to not be so invested in holding on to a picture of ourselves, a vision of ourselves, as, whatever it is, a kind person, someone who doesn't want to hurt anyone, there are lots of pictures we want to hold on to ourselves about, me included. And food is one of those issues that will really put you face to face with, is this true? Am I really living in alignment? Am I really living in the truth of how I want to see myself, how I want others to see me? And that can be a really painful process. And that is why raw food people always ask me, why is it when I tell people how I'm eating, or even vegans, they get angry and defensive. I'm like just sharing, I'm really enjoying this and I'm healthy. Why do they get angry? And it's because they are being forced, not by you, but just by you showing them a different way of being. Even if you never talk about the animal, you're showing them a different way of being that puts them face to face with some of the things that they don't necessarily want to look at in themselves. So it's challenging. It's challenging them. It's challenging them to know that they could also be taking a deeper look at what they're eating, what they're using for nourishment, because at some point they know they're really disconnected from the actuality of what that is. And to have to look at that is challenging. I think there are a lot of other reasons too, but I think that's often one of them. Just by living differently, you're challenging people who are living what might be the status quo or what's considered normal, that maybe there's a different way to be, and maybe you have some really good points about why you want to do that. But the food system is a good example of a place where we've really become disconnected from the reality of what's happening. There, you could name just about every other aspect of our lives too. So my work and my next book are really going to be about powerful remembering, powerful re-embodying, accepting, and really powerful actions to take if you are brave enough in yourself, if you are willing to detach from, let go of the narrative, the stories that you want to tell about yourself and your world. If you're willing, brave enough to, and willing to look at those stories and wonder about them and take a deeper plunge and see if maybe those really are just stories and that the inherent meaning there is not there, and maybe there are things that you want to change. So the bigger picture for me is reintegrating all of those parts internally and externally. Really don't think there's a difference in reality of bringing those parts back into harmony and bringing those parts back into the family of the story of who we are, and apart from the story, just the reality of how we're living our lives. Because what happens when we dismember, when we reject parts of ourselves, when we disassociate and distance ourselves from the reality of what's happening, is pain. What happens with that, and I think there's a lot of what's happening for a lot of our society now, is that it becomes depression, it becomes anxiety, it becomes this sense of being lost. And to heal that means a healing of all of the parts of ourselves that we have become dismembered from and strangers to and afraid to look at. So it's exciting to me. It's exciting to me because to re-embody the wholeness that is actually what's real, to drop the story and to begin in little ways and bigger ways, and it's a domino effect, to really live the truth and allow life to live through us, isn't always pretty. It isn't always fun. Sometimes it's really painful, and we have to co-create with the world as it is now. We're not living on the plains, anymore as American Indians, for instance, where we're really always in touch with the elements, and our food, and all of that, was once a very real part of our daily life. We weren't disconnected from any of it, and now we really are. So it doesn't mean that it turns out to be this beautiful picture in the sense of being a beautiful picture from the way that we may see it right now, but it's a whole picture. It's a whole picture. And it's the whole picture that is health, in my opinion. And that is, I can't think of the words to say how important that I think that is. That wholeness, and returning to that wholeness as much as possible. And when we can't return to the actual wholeness, to acknowledging, what that means for us. And I am on this journey as well. I'm co-creating with everything in and around me to discover what that means. And it's exciting. So I'm so inspired writing about it. And and I just am, if you're still with me on this long video, I'm appreciative of you, and thanks for being on this journey back to wholeness. Yeah. Have a great day.